Good morning, good afternoon to everyone. We are so glad that you are with us today. We have a great session, a guide to data products, how to understand and plan and implement your data products. And with us to discuss this topic, we have three other brilliant speakers to complement myself. We have our own Jay Piccionary, Senior Analyst, Senior Consultant at Eckerson Group, Anthony Cosgrove, founder of Harbor Data, and Henrik Strandberg, VP of Enterprise Data Management at Largify. So if you have questions or comments about data products, this group can answer them. So how are we going to proceed today? Well, we're going to break the discussion into three divisions or three groups. So the first is going to be understand data products. Then we're going to pivot to how do you plan for data products, and finally, how do you implement data products? And obviously, this is a big topic. We can't address everything, so we're going to cherry pick some areas and dive deep into them. And I do want to point out that we at Eckerson Group have spent a lot of time the last, I'd say, year and a half writing, thinking, speaking, consulting about data products. And we've got a page called a topic page on data products. There's 18 resources up there, reports, articles, podcasts, webinars. So please consult that to augment what you learned today. And if you want to talk to us at Eckerson Group or even one of our guest speakers, Anthony or Henrik, please call us. We have a office hours button on that topic page, and you can use that to schedule some time. So with that, let's commence. I will do a 5-minute context setting for each of these sections here. So just understanding data products is a little bit tricky today because there is confusion out there and people have different conceptions of what a data product is or isn't. But I think if we go back to basics, we all shop for products in retail stores, right? So how do we do that? What is that experience like? Well, it's pretty simple. We go into a store, we browse the aisles, we examine the products, we can compare to others, we add them to our cart, we purchase them, and we take them home. Pretty simple, right? So what are the basic characteristics of those retail products that make them easy to find, buy, and take home? Well, one, they're standardized. They contain the product, it individually contain the same ingredients, components, and created in the same way every time, tested and guaranteed. They are packaged with rich descriptions, so you know exactly what's in the box or the can, so you know what you're getting. They're shoppable. They're in a store, so they're easy to find, easy to compare with other products, easy to acquire and purchase. And they're deliverable. Obviously, in a physical store, you deliver them to your own house in your own car or vehicle. Or in this day and age, you can have the store delivered to you. Or if it's an online store, you can pick the delivery method and timing of your choice. And finally, there's an implicit guarantee with products that if they don't meet your expectations, they're not delivered as promised, you can return them. So there's a guarantee. So that's kind of the essence of a retail product. And I think a data product really isn't that different, to be honest with you. There are a couple of unique characteristics, which we'll talk about here. Data products are actually subsets of data assets, and they're subsets because of these key characteristics. Let's go through these. They're targeted to a specific audience. We'll show you that audience or those audiences in a second. The data products are designed for broad sharing. They're not one-off products for one person or one group necessarily. They're designed for reuse, continual usage, packaged with rich metadata. They're systematically governed, so they're delivered as promised. They're managed by a product team, continuously funded and enhanced. And finally, if you haven't, this is not always true, but if a company generates more than, I'd say, a dozen data products, behooves them to put them in a data marketplace. So that's my 5 minutes of context, maybe a little less. So I have one more slide. Got them all excited on the panel here. So Yeah, I think a lot of the confusion around data products today is that they can be anything. They really can. It really depends on who the target user is. So you can see here a list of target users and the types of data products they might consume, right? Starting with a data engineer or developer, they really want products that are like reusable code components or reusable data sets, right? But if you go all the way down to the bottom, your business executives, your customers, your external partners, they're going to want something at much higher level, right? Standardized dashboards and reports and that kind of thing, right? And as you go down that list, I think the degree of governance rigor has to increase because the impact of those products becomes greater. All right. So with that, I'm done with my little 5-minute intro. And I'd like to open this up to the panel for their thoughts on what I presented. Did I get it right? What did I miss? What does the market need to know about data products and what they are? So I'm going to turn first to Jay Piccineri for his thoughts on this topic.
Yeah, well, not surprisingly, I think you got it right. I think it's important to perhaps emphasize the difference between a data asset and a data product, because we've had data all along, we've had dashboards all along, and star schemas and whatever other kinds of designs for packaging data. But so what makes a data asset a data product is kind of the key question, which you just went over here. And the ability, so we see reuse is an important aspect. Well, you can't reuse something if you can't find it. And if you don't have the ability to search for it or browse through basic data product categories, then how can you reuse something? So I think it's important to realize that metaphor of the retail product experience, shopping experience, is really what we are saying you need to find a way to recreate within the world of data. What we have done in the past with data warehouses, which I'm not dissing at all. I think they're valuable. They serve a purpose even today. But from the end user's point of view, what we've been doing all along is like giving people a hard hat and a manual on how to operate a forklift and shoving them into the warehouse and saying, good luck, everything you need is here, you just got to find it and learn and figure out how to get it. And that's one of the distinguishing characteristics here about a data product, is that it's packaged with information and it needs to live somewhere where in a platform where it can be found. And I think that, to me, I'm going to say something perhaps controversial here, is that the data marketplace, whether you build it or buy it, is a key element of having data products. If you don't have a data marketplace, then I'm going to argue that you don't have data products.
Oh, well, you're stealing my thunder from later on, Jay. But I like your hard hat analogy, because I think in our space, in the data world, for the last 30 years, if we carry this retail analogy forward, it's like we have asked users to go get data in the warehouse instead of the store, right? And they have to be skilled enough to understand how to navigate this massive warehouse, regional warehouse, to get what they want. It's just too much. So I think you're right. But we're going to talk a lot about the data marketplace in the third section of this conversation. So Anthony, Henrik, what are your thoughts about what a data product is from a market perspective?
Yeah, so like the retail analogy is a great one, right? Everybody can relate to that. I think one of the bits that's maybe kind of missing and is quite important is this whole area around permissions and permissioning. So kind of entitlements around access, around use, how long you're able to access something for, whether you can or can't take a copy of it, what is the permitted use case for it, as that ties back to a legal or compliance framework. That's quite different, right? When I go to the store and I buy some ketchup, it's like I pay some money and I can do what I want with that. Whereas I think data tends to have quite significantly more complexity, where you have to manage the risk, Yeah, it's very easy to copy it. It's very easy to transform it. It's easy to combine it with other things. It can quite quickly get diluted, and you can kind of lose track of where the data came from and what was happening there. So I think kind of maybe the bit that's missing a little bit for me is around permissioning, but then also kind of the lineage of permissions as a data product kind of goes through its life cycle and inevitably gets customized and transformed by different users. I think kind of listening to you, Jay, I kind of really agree. You know, I think when we think about looking for data products, right, they have to be visible, they have to be discoverable, and that the barrier to that has to be incredibly low. Like if you look at all the users there who can get value from data, and like if you think about most organizations today, like almost everybody, you know, in any meaningful organization is going to have a data component to their role, right? They're going to want to be data driven. They're going to be wanting to understand metrics. They're going to want to test and learn. They're going to want to improve. And that really comes down to data. So I think kind of everybody sort of moved into being kind of data driven or data influenced. And I think what that means is that, you know, certainly for your data products, you know, you really need them to apply to the largest target audience, and that's everyone, technical or non-technical. So the concept of, you know, let's say let's pick on a senior executive and just assume that senior executive doesn't have technical skill. They might do, but let's assume they don't. You know, the idea of them kind of logging into a warehouse and sort of sifting through a bunch of tables to try and find the thing that's relevant for them is just like not very plausible. One thing I probably would push back on a little bit, and I think you kind of alluded to this, Wayne, was, you know, the idea that, you know, if you don't have a marketplace, you don't have products. And I think there is some kind of threshold where that becomes true. I think, Wayne, you kind of said like a dozen products, that sort of feels about right. So when I sort of talk to data product managers, you know, quite a lot of them are kind of feeding their products directly into a downstream system to be consumed, you know, by an end user in the business who may not even necessarily know that there's a data product, which meets all the characteristics that you explained, Wayne, like in the background, actually feeding into that. But I suspect as you start to build those out, to your point, Jay, around reusability and visibility, you know, I think you do need to go, okay, I need to put this somewhere it's more visible. You know, I maybe need to add in some user experiences for different user types. And that thing that was feeding that application and providing some useful insight to the user of that application, that's now also being used by a data scientist to build a model, or it's being used by a senior exec to, you know, take a strategic business decision or whatever it happens to be.
Yeah, you know, there kind of is a tension between a product that's targeted to an audience and a product that's reusable, right? So if the product's targeted to an audience, you're right, maybe it just gets fed right into their downstream system, right? But no one else knows about it typically, or can find it or can access it if they want to, basically reuse it. So maybe there's a certain type of product that is both targeted and needs to be more broadly shared, right? And reusable.
I think that's a great thought. And I don't know if that's a different type of product or that's just the approach that you want to take. So, you know, if you do have a data marketplace and you are feeding a product directly into an application, you know, is there value in just having that represented on the marketplace? You know, is there wider demand for that? You know, what we see across all of the data marketplaces that are powered by Harbour, is so many of the products are customized by so many of the users. You know, the norm is that a user would take the product and customize it in some way. So that might be something like a simple filter or format change, or it might be something quite elaborate, like deriving new values and making a join with, you know, some data from a different data product, you know, extrapolating that out into a visualization. But what we see time and time again is customization. So I think, you know, if we think about that product that's feeding into that application, let's say that's a table, you know, there might be lots and lots of use cases for that table, you know, 1 or 2 steps removed.
Interesting. Henrik, you get the last word here before we move on.
Yeah, no, I really like this. Generally, the analogy of looking at ourselves as consumers and thinking, what do we need, what do we expect, what do we want when we acquire a product in some way. It doesn't necessarily need to be a consumer packaged goods product in a store. It can also be a life insurance product or Or you go to the movies and you expect a service experience, or you go to a restaurant and you want the food to be served warm. You want to get exactly what you ordered. Everyone in the party should get their meal at the same time. You want a nice experience. You want the music can't be too loud, etc., etc. Right? So as a customer, put yourself in that shoes. As a data customer, as a data stakeholder, what is it you're actually looking for, right? And the more you can define that, like this is what we're delivering as the data team, as the data vendor. This is how we define. This is the service level you can expect. Here's the data quality. These are the number of test passes we've run, and here's the process we've gone through to harvest and mine and refine and curate these data. Right? You publish that. This is what you can expect. It's in my mind, it's a really powerful tool to build trust with your customers. And I think that's a little bit the gap that I've seen historically, like using data and data products in particular to build trust with your customers. And it's a really powerful framework, I think, to look into data products.
So that is a great segue to our next section, where we're going to talk about planning to implement data products. But before we go there, I just want to remind the audience, if you have a question or a comment, please use the Q&A tab.
There are a couple of questions here. If you want to,
okay.
Yeah, well, not in the Q&A tab. It's in the chat. But
okay. All right. How do reusable code components, queries, and features become data products?
Mm-hmm.
Anybody want to tackle that?
Yeah, I'll tackle that. So if I kind of use the Harbor as the basis for this, because that's what I know. So within Harbor, a data product can be any combination of any type of digital object. So it could be a table. And I think when people think about data products, often they're thinking about a table. But it could be a notebook, it could be raw code, it could be an API, it could be a visualization, it could be music files. I mean, essentially, it's whatever the data product manager believes the data consumer needs in order to deliver that target value proposition. And to the point Henrik made earlier, you know, having like deep empathy for, if I was going to consume this, what would I need? And what we find, like, again, time and time again, is a table as a data product. It's usually not very helpful. You know, at a minimum, you're going to need, you know, some kind of instruction and a kind of data dictionary around what is it. Often we see them coupled with APIs where you can kind of hit a process or hit a model or adapt that in some way. So even a table usually needs other types of data assets coupled with it. But yeah, for us, we would sort of, you know, essentially define the product as, you know, these data assets, wrap it in packaging, wrap it in permissioning, push it to a storefront where it can be discovered, accessed, and used.
Yeah, I would just add that the question contains the answer. How do reusable code components become data products? Well, because they are reusable, which means that they're well defined, they're standardized, and they're probably located in a place that people can find them and reuse them and use them, put them together kind of as building blocks to create other things, kind of like what Anthony was saying.
And they're packaged with the information that tells you what the product, what this reusable code component as a product is intended to do, and you know, appropriate use and providing sample data output. But you know, if you have a reusable code component that, like a query that produces a data set, that's effectively, think of it as a virtual table, right? Where the table doesn't exist physically until you run the code, and that's when you have the other information about it that tells a potential consumer what this is for, right? A pair of shoes does something specific as opposed to, you know, a set of steak knives, right? Totally different products do different things. But if it's, you know, in the case of, unlike those physical products, you just look at them and you know they're different. You need information, metadata around the products in order to inform the consumer what they're getting and what they can expect from it and what they shouldn't expect from it.
Right. So we had another comment. Are you referring to collaboration type tools to find products? No, we're not. And we're going to talk about the difference between data catalogs, which is collaboration, and data marketplaces in a second. Those are two different types of platforms, but they do overlap in many ways. Someone else commented, the critical pillar is also a domain, subdomain that owns that product from a value proposition. I think that conjures up the whole data mesh methodology with domains that are creating their own products or subdomains for their own benefit, and ideally, hopefully, for the benefit of others. I've always said the missing ingredient of a data mesh is the data marketplace, so people can find those data products that are being built out in the domains. And then Corinna asks examples of data products.
Sorry to interrupt. I think on this one, like I think this is I think it's a really good point about product ownership. I think you're right. Kind of within data mesh, it is defined as like domains. So you might have a customer like data domain, or you might have a marketing domain. You know, you can define those as you need to. I think like the critical component really though is data product management. And I think one of the challenges I have a little bit with domains and the concept of data mesh as well is it doesn't focus as much as I would like on data product management as a discipline and what that looks like. And you can have a domain and you can have stakeholders who are responsible for this in some shape or form, and maybe they own that data collectively and they're in solving that problem. It doesn't mean they're good at data product management. So I think kind of the critical bit is data product management. If that's owned by a domain or a data team or a single data product manager, I don't think that matters as much. But for me, data product management and being good at that is key. And that's really about how you iteratively develop the products, how you build empathy with the users, to Henrik's point earlier, how you take a product to market in a way that's really efficient so you don't get dragged into supporting every user and every use case, which then bogs you down and stops you from making more great data products. So I think that's really important. So I just add that into the data mesh.
Yeah, and that's a great segue to section 2 or part 2 of this presentation. And we did have a question about to provide examples of data products. Well, these are examples here, just a few. But let's keep moving on to section 2. So Anthony was talking about product management and how that's critical to data products. So the key part of a product management organization is the product manager, who helps shape the product and ship the product and manage the product. And just to be clear, a product manager, because in the data space, we don't have any experience with product management, right? We might think of it as a project manager. No. BI data developer. No. Data analyst or data scientist. No. A product manager comes with unique skills, as I said, to shape, ship, or manage the product, as you can see here from these bullets. But we're not going to belabor the point here. Their overall responsibility is to understand from talking to customers what it is they want, and then work with a development team to develop and ship the product, and then calibrate, the feedback, the usage of that product, and how to enhance it to improve customer satisfaction. So that's the product manager's job. And at this point, I want Henrik to kind of take over here, because the next 2 slides are his. He's actually run a data product management team and processes, and so he's going to describe how he set them up. So Henrik, I'm going to give this to you to describe.
Yeah, actually, if you wouldn't mind just skipping back to the previous slide, just a little nuance or comment here to further throw a little wrench into this machinery. There's 2 different disciplines or schools of thought when it comes to product management, depending on the use case. There's product-centric and customer-centric, right? And I think the one that I've seen being much more applicable to the world of data product management is the customer-centric view, where there, for example, there's this phrase called nihido, like nothing important happens in the office. That's kind of like the rallying cry for make sure you spend the vast majority of your time talking to customers. In our case with data, talk to the stakeholders. Go out there and talk to the analytics teams, the finance teams, the operations teams, the business executives that ultimately use your data, and really understand what their problems are, right? Like any software development, you define the problem and you deliver a solution. When you can understand what the impact of the problem is, what is their problem, then you can start figuring out what the solution is. But the key, the trigger to starting this is to listen to the customer and understand what the customer problem is before you start building solutions, right?
You know, if companies and data teams did that, we as consultants would be out of work.
Great.
I think most of the recommendations we provide to our clients are how to go out and align with their customers by regularly talking to them and understanding their needs.
What happens, Wayne, is that the customers will come to you and say, what should we be asking for? How can we become better customers? And that's a little bit the whole point of this. Right?
Yeah.
Training.
I love this slide from your ebook that's on our website. So this workflow, team-based workflow. So step us
Yeah.
through.
So what we did in my previous company, this is $8 billion global enterprise. So when we took over following a large ERP transformation project to set up the data management function, so again, we looked pretty much at regular customer-centric product management. How do we design the intake form? How do we make commitment? How do we communicate what our process is? How do we build trust with both the IT services teams who will actually engineer and build the solutions and the business stakeholders? So obviously a pretty key component of delivering great service is to have a team or a function that is dedicated to customer success, customer communication, measuring customer satisfaction, reporting on progress, challenges, blockers, updates, etc.
That's the customer services row here in this slide. Yeah.
So this was essentially like a function, a subset of our data management team that was dedicated to customer communication, customer services. The product management function we already talked a little bit about, mainly around prioritization, securing resources, shepherding the entire scoping and delivery process of the products or the services we provided. And then, of course, we have the engineering and the data management teams themselves scattered across the enterprise who did like the heavy lifting. And I don't actually think that adopting a more product management focused framework changes a ton in this world, which I think in our case, probably about 90% of the actual spend was in that swim lane, which changes very little. So when we talk about adopting data product or data product management frameworks, it may sound a little more complicated than it actually is. I think for the vast majority of people who work with this, little changes in their day-to-day, it's a little bit more of a mindset of working smarter, not harder, right? If we would take a typical like workflow, how we get a request from a business leader that hey, my sales data doesn't match up with my customer data, so I can't do rep crediting correctly. All right, let's run this through our intake process. How important is this to you? If you had to put a financial value on this, how would you quantify it?
Do you want me to go to the next slide?
Sure.
Okay. Talking about value of data.
Yeah. So this kind of comes back a lot of, as we justify what we do as data leaders, how do we deliver value? In a customer-centric, in a customer-driven product management model, the customer decides what is the value of their problem. And ultimately, if they have $1 million problem and we as a data team deliver a solution to that problem, by definition, we have delivered $1 million worth of value, right? So this doesn't look at the value of the data assets themselves. It doesn't look at the value of data products. How much did it cost to build it? It cost 100,000, it's worth 100,000. That's not true. It solved $1 million problem, therefore it's worth $1 million. And adopting that framework or that way of thinking helps you as a data product manager to prioritize what your team is working on. Now, then there's a second component, which is ROI, where, okay, $1 million problem can cost $10,000 to solve, or it can cost $10 million to solve. And that, of course, should influence the prioritization as well.
So isn't there another dimension here that a lot of customers come and ask for things, but sometimes they're not really committed to implementing them?
Absolutely, and that's a big problem I think we have. There's this perception that enterprise services are free, right? Mm-hmm. There is no, our customers don't need to pay anything. The only thing that they're expected to invest is on their end to actually utilize and test and integrate and implement the products. So you might spend all this time and bandwidth to build a data product that is delivered for free because it's too complicated to try and recharge another team, or set up a product code and charge it in some product accounting system. Most teams don't do that, right? We build it for free. There's an expectation that you're getting the bandwidth of the data management team for free. And then they realize that, this is too difficult to actually utilize and implement, and it turns out to be a waste of everyone's time. So absolutely, when you scope out, before you commit to doing this, there needs to be a communicated expectation around what the investment is on the customer's end as well. Right?
Yeah. So a couple comments from the audience on the domain discussion we had with Anthony. Kieran says, agreed. In our setup, the data product manager and the product is developed using the product management practice. Domain is the owner in the operating model. Corinna agrees with you, Henrik. All products are customer focused, else no reason to create. And she disputes my comment that I'd be out of a job if people just listen to their customers. She says, no way, we can always help them do it better. I guess I would agree with that.
The popular kind of phrase whenever you question customer-centric product management is back to Henry Ford. If I'd asked my customers what they wanted, they would have said faster horses, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When it comes to innovation, sometimes the subject matter experts on the product team possess the creative genius to build products that customers don't know yet that they need or want, and that is a fine balance, right?
Yeah.
But what's important here is to have the transparency with the customers. This is what we're doing, and here's why, right? And get the acceptance from your stakeholders, including your finance leaders and the sales leaders who generate the revenue from the business that funds your team, that they know what you're working on and why. This should be a very transparent process where they're invited to participate. You can't create this product-centric model where we build data because we understand data better than you do, right?
There are a couple of comments and questions in the Q&A tab as well, which I think there's a...
So Lee asked, what are the main differences between data product managers and software product managers?
That's a great question. I would say very, very little. Not only is, a lot of data products, the way they're built and the way they're potentially delivered kind of overlaps heavily with software. So if you think about some of those data assets, that you might put into a product, might be a data app, it's software. It might be an interactive visualization, arguably software. So I think there's very, very little difference here at all. If there is any difference, it's probably just a kind of an appreciation of knowledge and understanding of data and databases as opposed to software and applications.
Yeah, and I think software as a discipline has embraced the product concept and product thinking, and that's what's kind of new within the data world, and I think which drives questions like, well, what's the difference between what we've been doing all along? Because all along, at least in terms of my experience, working with stakeholders and getting and understanding what they need and trying to solve their problems has always been the case. But there has been much less of a concept of somebody owning a product, planning its life cycle and making sure that it maintains its utility and the impact that it was intended to deliver. Because, as businesses change and there are external forces that drive change, a product may no longer be valuable as it was once in the past when the company was facing a different set of challenges, right? So in the data world, there's less of a discipline and a well-accepted discipline and roles around who owns that life cycle. And I think we can, whether you embrace data mesh as a concept, we can thank data mesh for bringing, lifting this issue up and why we're talking about it, I think.
Yeah, I think when we consider within the organization, within the enterprise, I think that's very, very true. But there is an area where data product management has been happening for decades, really, really successfully. So if you look at kind of large data businesses, so, some of our customers are Moody's, CoreLogic, largest data vendor in the US. They've been managing data as a product for decades. They have data product managers. Unlike, to your point, Henrik, like a lot of the enterprise data product managers aren't going to create an SKU and an accounting line and a P&L off of, their data products. But they do, and they take them to market and they work with their customers and they understand the customer's needs and they adapt and iterate and change them. So if people do want to look for an example of very successful data product management, look at data businesses because they have been doing it for a while. And I think almost everything that they're doing is frankly a direct read across, with the possible exception of running a P&L.
Yeah, you can look at content publishing companies like Reuters or Shutterstock, other great examples. Data assets in the form of images and news stories.
Yeah, but I think to your point, Jay, within the enterprise, this is net new. And I think data mesh has been great in sort of highlighting that gap.
So that's kind of a good segue to part 3 of our webinar here. So let me bring up the screen and keep moving on. So part 3 is about implementing data products. So we've created this life cycle of a data product, how to create and govern a data product, which runs from defining the product you're going to build, who are your customers, what are their requirements, building that product, enhancing that product through customer feedback and usage, packaging the product with sufficient, robust business and technical metadata, then governing that product through business reviews. Is this a product we want to build? Can we invest in it? Does it have sufficient ROI and impact? To technical governance, does it scale? Does it meet our technical standards or our design standards, et cetera, to product provisioning. All right, once we've approved the product, then we need to get it into the hands of users. We can push it right into the application, as we said earlier, or publish to a data marketplace. And once we do that, we need to make sure users understand where it is, how to use it, how to get it, how to use it, and how to get value from it. So through training support. And then finally, we have to understand the life cycle of a project. We need to monitor its usage. We need to iterate and develop new versions, optimize, and then finally retire it. So obviously very comprehensive here, but we want to just drill down in the remaining 15 minutes of this webinar on number 5, product provisioning here, especially while we have Anthony here, who's kind of an expert in data marketplaces. So what is a data marketplace? It's essentially a place where data producers or data providers can take data assets and turn them into data products and publish them to a library or catalog or market that makes it very easy for data consumers to browse those, find what they want by looking at metadata, and then quote unquote purchasing that, subscribing to it, downloading it, and then using it in their own world, in their own system. So a data marketplace has always been, until recently, something that these data brokers on the commercial side have used, right? And we have Amazon Data Marketplace. Now we have Snowflake Marketplace. But what we're talking about is something internal to organizations that they can stand up on their own as a place to publish these data products that we've been talking about, and for consumers to find them easily in a frictionless manner. And as Jay said earlier, stealing my thunder, I think, and I've been saying for a while now, the data marketplace unlocks the true value of data products. And I think hopefully this slide will make that clear. It automates frictionless data sharing, which I don't know about you, but in most of the organizations that we go into, data sharing is a big pain point. People tending to sit on data silos, perhaps hoarding data, certainly can't find it and may not have permission to access it. And the data marketplace tends to unlock all of that. So it makes it easy for users to browse, search, and evaluate relevant content. This is really important here. It defines up front who can view, access, and subscribe to that content or those data products, right? Instead of having to ask permission and wait for days, weeks, months, and sometimes years, I've seen examples of, they typically can get it right away or within a short period of time. Because they can subscribe to these things, right? Because they have predefined access to them. They can subscribe, which defines who can consume what content for how long and what frequency and through what channels and delivery methods. So it's a subscription. The subscription contains terms of use and service. What can users do with that content or not do for how long? And then what must data producers provide to users in terms of timeliness, freshness, quality, right? And that's either a explicit or implicit contract. It often specifies the price, but internally, usually it's either a chargeback or there is no cost at all. But you could put one if you wanted to. And then finally, and this is a good one, it automatically delivers the content to your desired target via your preferred channel in the specified format. So it takes a lot of the work out of moving and loading data. So that's why I'm pretty bullish on data marketplaces. I predicted that within 3 to 5 years, every large company that's moving down the data product path is going to have one of these because it's just essential if you're a data product organization. Oh, and there is my prediction right there. So I know there's a lot of confusion about the difference between especially data catalog and data marketplace. And I put this up there because each of these platforms is generating metadata about data assets. In the case of a data platform and a data catalog, it's generating metadata about those assets. And then a marketplace has additional metadata to the data catalog about how to subscribe to those data products. So there is similarity, but a big difference. And I think today, anyway, you probably would do best by having separate platforms for each of these three things. How this will evolve in the future, I don't know. Data catalog has all the metadata of all the data assets. You would think it would be a logical place to support a data marketplace, but they haven't proven that they're interested for the most part, although that's changing, or capable of delivering a data marketplace. So my perspective right now is that you need a best of breed approach here. You need separate catalog and marketplace. And then I want to bring Anthony in here because this is his architecture, how Harvard does it. And you can see the data catalogs are input into the data marketplace, right? So Anthony, do you want to take over from here and explain what?
Yeah, sure. And we were talking about this earlier. I think the data platform, data catalog, and data marketplace, I think you could almost potentially redraw that as a Venn diagram as well, because I think each of them have a relationship to each other, which is kind of what you can see here in the bottom half of the slide. So when we deploy a data marketplace for one of our customers, which is the big blue box in the middle, there's an integration with the data catalog. Sometimes it's more than one catalog, because I'm sure people on the call are familiar with. And what we're kind of pushing and pulling there is metadata. But it's not, the data marketplace isn't there to cover all of the data in the organization. It's really mainly interested in the data assets that are rolled up into data products, and then what happens with those products, and any kind of customized or transformed derived versions of those that are created within the marketplace. So there's like a push-pull of metadata. You then have connectivity to the data platforms. Sometimes the data moves to the marketplace and is stored locally within the data marketplace platform, but often it's just left at source. And what happens here is, effectively we have kind of connectors to those platforms. You define, the table or the notebook or the code or the visualization or whatever it happens to be within the platform that you want to manage as an asset. And then you're able to effectively reuse those assets across as many products as you want. But the products are created by selecting one or more of those data assets and then wrapping them in packaging, wrapping them in the permissioning that Wayne was talking about earlier around subscriptions, and then placing them into a marketplace. And I think, Wayne, your point earlier around kind of what that permission process looks like is really interesting. So within Harbor, we kind of support 3 workflows. So you have sort of the self-serve workflow, where I've turned up to a marketplace, there's a subscription available to me, I subscribe to that. We have a request workflow, so I can see a product, but I can't subscribe to it. I have to request access, and that will then be routed and happen. And then we actually have a third one, which is you turn up to the marketplace and Wayne's already provisioned his product to you. So he's pushed it to you and you accept the terms and it's there. So you don't really have to go shopping for it. It gets pushed to you instead. On the right-hand side of that, diagram.
Up again. Sorry about that.
No, not at all. You then have the consumer kind of activity in relation to the products. And I think this is kind of where I think there's like a critical question around what you want to get from your marketplace. So the obvious thing that a data marketplace does is it accelerates like time to access the data, so I can discover it quickly. It's trusted because it's been put there, it's been managed by a product manager, I can understand it, I can compare it, all the things that we've been talking about, and then I subscribe to it or request access or whatever I happen to do. And that was fast, and that was faster than it otherwise would have been if I'd used a different tool, or I was kind of going into the warehouse or a lake, I was kind of going through all the metadata of all of the data available in my organization. So that's good. But what we found is better, is when you're able to have self-service user experiences around the data products within that platform. And where I think this really comes into its own is when you have these data products that have a range of different asset types, you effectively have different user experiences for those different asset types. So if I give you an example, if one of the asset types in your data product is a notebook, you want to be able to execute that notebook against maybe a target table or some unstructured data. If it's a visualization, you want to be able to see that and potentially interact with it. If it's a PDF, you want to open it and read it. So kind of what we've kind of moved towards, and what we're seeing a lot of value in, is providing those user experiences. And that's not just great for the consumer, because they don't just get faster time to access, they actually get faster time to value. It's also great for the producers, because out of the box, they sort of post their data product, and not only can the consumer self-serve the subscription, but they're also able to self-serve the use. So they provide this sort of library of kind of user experiences that they don't have to manage and maintain. And to the point that we were making earlier, and I think someone's raised a great question here about, can a data product be used across functions or processes? Essentially it can, because ultimately if I go in and I subscribe to a data product, I might be a non-technical user and I've got a no-code, low-code way of transforming it or querying it. Wayne might go in as a data scientist and have a secure sandbox or a data science workbench that he can use in order to build a model or do some complex data engineering. So this is where it really starts to scale. And I think if you don't have these consumer experiences, then there's sort of a hidden problem that gets created by data marketplaces. If you're just accelerating time to access, you're also accelerating the consumer into the next problem that they're going to face.
So Anthony, are you basically saying that instead of just giving users a data set, you're going to give them the application that the data set works within? instead of having them download that data set to their site and then find an application to use it.
Correct. And that's not to say they shouldn't be able to distribute it. They should absolutely be able to distribute it, so long as the data product manager is happy for them to do it, and it meets the sort of legal and regulatory, requirements around the data set. But if you can actually kind of get the person to gain access to the data very quickly, and then with a couple of clicks be able to actually use it in anger on the same platform, that really accelerates value. And it's kind of tricky to do, right? Because you've got different personas with different levels of skill. So we're talking about quite a wide range of tools and user experiences here. But if you do it well, then your users actually get to the outcome that they were looking to get to with your data product,
Right.
as opposed to kind of very quickly then hitting the next problem of how do I move it? Like, how do I get compute? How do I get tools?
Yeah, so it's a one-stop shop, really, to meet
Exactly.
all of their needs.
Exactly. And what we found is that's a very long tail with a lot of cost, a lot of friction, a lot of different handoffs between different teams and different people with different skills. So if you can truncate that bit, then your marketplace is really singing. And as a data product manager, you've got this, like, I post my product once, and it's kind of open to the widest range of users, the widest range of user experiences, the widest range of use
So
cases.
let users consume it however they want inside the platform.
Correct.
Well, let me ask you a tough question here. Maybe it's unfair.
Oh, no.
So when I talk about data marketplaces to a lot of potential customers, they kind of look at me cross-eyed, like, well, we have a data catalog. That's all we need. We go find the data there, and then, and then we get access to it from there through, we ask permission, and we get permission, and then we point our BI tool at it, for instance. So for most people, that seems sufficient, and they don't see the need for a data marketplace. If they do see the need, a lot of them say, well, I'm going to rely on my data catalog vendor to extend their platform to support this functionality. It seems like just one minor step away from what they're already doing. So curious about your thoughts on those two things.
Yeah, so I think, I would kind of start with, what's the purpose of a catalog and what's the purpose of a marketplace? They're profoundly different, right? The catalogs were created to look at all of the data assets within an organization and really help people create an inventory of those, understand them, and then start to manage either kind of legal compliance, kind of regulatory risk associated with that in a really good way, or to start looking at quality and making improvements to the data and understanding how it flows and what it looks like. That's a whole roadmap. That's a whole application, right? With very specific personas doing very specific work to achieve those outcomes. Then you look at a data marketplace, and it's really profoundly different. It's not interested in all of the data assets. It's really only interested in the data assets that roll up into data products, and it's really interested in data products. It's not necessarily interested in the data assets within your organization either. It's kind of interested in your whole ecosystem, which extends beyond the borders of your enterprise, which means a whole load of organizational entitlements and management and identity and access management controls and a whole bunch of things there. And then to the point that I just made, the data marketplace really needs to actually enable direct interaction with the data. Whether you're evaluating data and you need to do that securely in a way where you can't take the data away or you can't take the model away because that wouldn't be acceptable, or whether that's just, you don't have technical skills and you kind of want a sort of ChatGPT style experience of querying the data and you can't write SQL, that kind of needs to happen. And the catalogs don't really do that today, right? That they don't have this concept of a data consumer's experience, and they don't typically move the data either. So I think kind of when you think about the core purpose of a catalog and a marketplace, they are quite profoundly different. And what you end up with is two really quite different applications with different workflows, different target personas, different roadmaps. And to the point that you made earlier, you could probably have one enormous, gigantic application that maybe does both of those things. Maybe you see those emerge, but today they're quite separate and distinct.
Right. All right. So we've got 2 minutes left. I want to give Henrik 30 seconds and Jay 30 seconds if they want to make a comment, and then I'll wrap up.
Yeah, and listening to this whole data catalog versus data marketplace, 100% agree. I mean, my old company, we had 1.2 million products in our data catalog, in our product catalog. we only sold about 20,000 to customers, right? And those came with a whole set of product expectations that were not evident from the data catalog. They expected customer service, for example. The customer service does not show up in the product catalog, right? So it's really just stop thinking so much about the data assets and the data, the binary that we see in front of us on the screen, and put yourselves in the seat of the consumer. What does the consumer need, right?
All right, Jay.
Yeah, I would just kind of go back to an old-timey metaphor. You know, in a retail space, catalogs tell you what is available to consume, but it's a whole other process to actually get it,
Yeah.
right? And that's, I think, really what we're talking about here is making it possible to both understand what's out there as what in terms of data products, but also to be able to get at it and work with that data within one experience.
Great. All right. So thank you so much to our speakers and our audience for your attention and your fine questions. Just in summary, you know, we talked about, you know, what is a data product? And I think one thing to take away is it's a subset of data assets with unique characteristics. To plan for data product success, you know, we talked about building a product mindset by hiring experienced product managers and creating, Henrik argued, creating a tripartite team of product management, customer service, and data development. And then for implementing, there is a substantial life cycle for managing data products, but we focused in on data marketplaces. And we think going forward, that's going to be really critical to the success of your data product experience. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody. This is our consulting team, some of our clients. If you're interested in working with us, we'd love to talk to you. And thank you to our audience and to our guest speakers, Anthony and Henrik. We learned a lot today. So
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Great. Bye.